Praised be Jesus Christ, and onward with Mary. Have a good and holy day, all of you, dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, and in the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning feature, Saints and Coffee. Today is Tuesday, the 28th of January. The Church celebrates in the traditional rite the feast of Saint Peter Nolasco, confessor, founder of the glorious, formerly family, religious order of the Mercedarian Fathers. He was visited by apparitions of Our Lady and the guardian angel, so a mystic who, however, greatly influenced Christian history. Extraordinary, I would almost say, of the 13th century, the era of Saint Francis of Assisi, to be clear, and Saint Dominic of Guzman. And today, Tuesday, I remind you that this evening, Bible Tuesday, Youth Tuesday, returns. At 9 p.m., don't miss tonight's episode. It's a recommendation. There it is, the prologue. Part 3 at 9 p.m. on Radio Dominatella's YouTube channel. Ours, share it, share it, share it. Always like, they're fundamental. And then I invite all of you when we put up posts to comment on them, because I know you do it amongst yourselves. But it would be nice if you'd also spend a few words commenting, both in those that we put in the YouTube community and in the Facebook profile of our own Radio Domina. We're going through the prologue of John, and tonight we'll be looking further into verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, we saw that, and now tonight we'll see that the Word was with God. What does this with God mean? This evening we'll talk about it. Don't miss it. This episode, especially for those of you who have more of a theological, dogmatic, biblical need, come on, spread the word. I'll see you tonight at 9 p.m. Last night there was the catechesis. On the rosaries, inside the confraternity of the Holy Rosary. Thank you. They tell me that because I don't look at them anymore. The viewing figures that we had on last night's episode. There it is, the title we delved into, New World Order, that is the New World Order and the New World Axis. Did we use this as the cover, or were there also photos? If I remember correctly, I'd like to show you Radio Domina's post announcing last night's episode. Anyway, if you haven't listened to it yet, as it has sparked interest and further discussion, you can find it on Radio Domina's playlist. Ours, you can connect and listen to it because it is, in my opinion, quite interesting. I quoted the message of Our Lady of Medjugorje of the 25th of August, 1991, in which message Our Lady anticipated by 2 or 3 months what would happen from there, too. Little would happen in the former Soviet Union, when at 6:45 p.m. local time, the red flag with the hammer and sickle was lowered forever. And in August, Our Lady said, "Help me to fight against Satan. I ask you for a novena of sacrifices and prayers to fulfill my plan which I began in Fatima." Truly very interesting. I have a fairly complete overview. Complete now, and for this I suffer greatly. I suffer greatly because I am an unheeded prophet. No one. Do you think I should end up as the director of a social network, limiting myself to that? If that were the case, I'd retire. Because I wasn't born for that. I'm a minister of God, not a television presenter. I believe I have a mission. Several things, many things confirm it. The first of which is that the persecution comes to me from all over the world. Everyone listens to me, no one wants me. And of course, me in this situation here, in which we find ourselves, as I said last night, I fear that some of you are missing out. The latest episodes and live only by a risk of religious fanaticism that is not good. Listen to these days' episodes, both of Saints and Coffee and the Catechesis. I'm trying to help myself and all the rest of you to observe with the right lenses, the magnifying glass, what is happening in the world. Faced with the unexpected, they've probably been working covertly to prepare for that. The formation of a new world axis, led by the Emperor. He doesn't call himself that, but you can see he thinks he is. The new Sun King, Donald Trump. American imperialism has never ended. It's never ended. Trump isn't doing anything new. America feels it owns the world. Americans feel they own the world. Trump isn't a mushroom that appeared in the middle of the sea or in the desert. Mushrooms grow in specific conditions. American culture. Now, this is interesting that this imperialism can be useful, like the emperor and like King Cyrus, like King Nebuchadnezzar, who weren't saints, but God made that stuff useful. That's what I meant these days. In fact, thank God, no one is attacking me for being pro-American or pro-Russian in favor of Putin or Trump. I'm examining the global situation, and of course the point here is that I believe I have a role not on a planetary level. I'm not crazy, and naturally everyone remains within the confines of their own poverty and misery. But on an ecclesial level, yes, we'll see how it goes. I don't believe that God, to us, the small remnant, I take responsibility for what I wanted to tell you. I don't believe that we, the small remainder, will meet our end in this situation where the tide is turning. The end of definitive censorship. And that's what's happening in the world. I didn't have time to write it down, but I'll make a post about it today. It's similar to what happened at Lepanto, when the Catholics and had to fight against the Muslims who had triple the fleet. Although smaller, however, the smaller fleet, however, was more numerous. Then there was Giovanni of Aragon. I think he was the one who commanded the Christian troops, the Don Giovanni of the time. And in any case, at a certain point, the event that changed the history of the world forever. Because if the Muslims had won, we would no longer be here today. The cross of Christ in Rome. And the event that changed history forever is that the wind which had been in the Muslims' favor suddenly and unexpectedly changed. The wind is changing. The title, in fact, of today's episode is Bergoglio. The title is amusing. I like it. It's the impeded seat. Now it's Bergoglio who's starting to feel it at the end of his term. Do you see today's Bergoglio at the level of planetary phenomenon? In the end, not from a chronological point of view in terms of death, but in terms of motivations and agenda to be implemented. Because what's the impediment now? Incredible, catechon against catechon. And like devils tearing each other apart, the world powers are moving against each other. It's no longer a homologation, unless they're acting, but I don't think they're putting on an act. So now we'll talk about it. The wind changes, we pray. This is the title, as you see, Bergoglio, and the impeded seat. The wind changes, we take, because, well, the wind changed so much. The wind turned in favor of the Christian troops, and Christianity triumphed over Islam in that battle. There. Right, we'll be back to that in a moment. So I'll see you this evening for the catechesis on the prologue, as I was saying. Yesterday evenings is available, which in fact I invite you to listen to when you hear these arguments that address the current situation. I invite you to do so, and then I wanted to tell you that we must intensify the prayer of Roma, and so we are in the year of Roma. Look at this, 2025, this 25. It always seems quite propitious to me. Anyway, this afternoon at 5 o'clock, I will then lead the Holy Rosary live on Radio Domina. I'll be expecting you. Don't miss it. The title last night, as I was saying, was New World Order, New World Axis, The Wisdom of Rome. And I had, this is the copertina of YouTube. Let me remind you of our coming events. Friday, in 4 days' time, we'll be in Savigliano at Casa Betania for the Feast of St. John Bosco at 4 p.m. And Sunday, the 2nd of February, next Sunday, is Candlemas, the Feast of the Presentation of Jesus at the Temple. We're at home, Bethany. Sorry, we're in Milan. We're in Milan, it's 3 p.m. But it doesn't appear yet. I don't know why. The place, however, is important to put it. It's not there. It's not written. I don't see it. Maybe you do, but I don't. Is it written there? Right then, I apologize. I didn't see him, and I still don't. Anyway, you see him, so much the better. NH. Congress at Asago. It's written Piccolino at Asago there where we always meet. At 3 p.m., there'll be 4 priests from the sodality, more than half, which doesn't take much. There's Brother Celestino, there's me, there's Father Johannes, and there's Father Ramon. Father Enrico and Father Pavel, for pastoral reasons, cannot be present. Confessions will begin around 2 o'clock, and then later I'll give you the more detailed program. Coaches are being organized over the next few days. There are still several places available. As I was saying yesterday, I urge the group leaders not to be discouraged, because it's normal to have this kind of lull period that goes from January, usually after the Christmas holidays, until the beginning of Lent. And so it doesn't come in anyway. Besides, it's not even a gathering. And there are coaches coming, from Veneto, from Friuli Venezia Giulia, from Trentino Alto Adige, from Emilia Romagna, departing from Cesena Nord, and from Abruzzo and Marche. Then I remind you of the appointment on the 11th of February, but there's still a bit of time for the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes in Verona. Now finally, let's move on to today's topic. Today's topic is quite interesting. As I was saying, it's a bit of a panda to what I was saying yesterday evening. And so you'll probably be able to better grasp the passages you heard in last night's catechesis. The title is, as I told you, Bergoglio is the impeded sea. The wind is changing, we pray. Impeded sea is a word evocative of our martyrdom, mine and that of the brothers of the sodality. I mean, we started this mission of ours that God entrusted to us between life and Our Lady, from the moment when Benedict, as we were also saying last night, he was forced to resign. But with a truly extraordinarily effective strategy, that of retaining the munus for himself, thus handing over only the throne, retaining the munus for himself and placing himself in a hindered position. In a hindered position, why? Because the ideology of the New World Order, the global world power, had turned against him. Because she went against him. Because Rome is the most important moral agency on the planet. We've said it before. There's no moral authority worldwide. There isn't any Islamic imam. There isn't any Buddhist leader. Dalai Lama, and so on, who has the importance, especially in the West, of course, but it is from the West that cultural and social dynamisms come, like the Bishop of Rome, like the Pope, and therefore a Pope like Joseph Ratzinger, guardian of the faith, who protects it doubly, but who guards the Catholic Church from the attacks of the dictatorship of relativism, was a pain in the neck. We don't see anything when we comment on certain statements. For example, one of the White House spokespeople in the Clinton-Obama administration, in which it was said the late Monsignor also said it, the late Monsignor Negri, that Benedict was openly obstructed by the Clinton administration. Obama. Anyway, the proof is when they blocked the bank accounts in the Vatican with the SWIFT. A serious breach with terrorist states. And this when then Benedict, on the 11th of February, 2013, announced his resignation. Immediately, you understand? Within a few hours, they unfroze the bank accounts. So headquarters prevented. And that's where we should always go back to. And the matrix, the magna question, the big question of it all. Because if the Pope didn't resign, and he was forced to resign, because canon law guarantees the Pope's resignation. We're not talking about the parish priest leaving, we're talking about the Roman pontiff. It's not a trivial matter to leave. He must leave. And there's the St. Gallen Mafia. All the documentation that Don Minutella, first, I'll boast until death, even post-mortem, of having been the first to shout the truth from the rooftops. By the way, not at my house, from the rooftops. That's why the Bergoglian power machine immediately identified I'm a signatory to this, a real danger when I shouted it in the parish that had been entrusted to me, and that was ripped away from me. Violently farewell, false church, unworthy prostitute, multinational of shame. To whom did you sell yourself? The powerful world powers, farewell, we will go into the basements. It was a prophetic announcement. I don't know how it's possible. This continuous delegitimization of myself. As Jesus said, believe in works. If you want to believe in me, at least believe in the works. In any case, we had started this campaign and then gradually this unspeakable news. Ineffable, I'd say. It started to circulate thanks to yours truly, who takes the little twig, the historical artifact, and goes around Italy, and then gradually throughout the world to shout the truth. And you know how it is with truth processes. Whoever shouts them at the beginning, they are what they are. Then they make their own way, or by themselves. Many different people have drawn from me, even verbally I'd say they've made their own way. But everyone has drawn from here. I prepared the dish, the chef is Don Minutella. Well, then it happens. It happened that Benedict XVI retired with an absolutely unthinkable title. Pope Emeritus, but does that mean Pope? Emeritus has never existed. A position, a legal institution of Pope Emeritus, Pope Emeritus. It doesn't exist. A Pope cannot be Emeritus. So much so that the title is then suppressed. It's cancelled. But Pope Benedict remains there as catechesis. On the 31st of December 2022, he dies after years of immolation for the Church. In his place, the heretical apostate Jorge Mario Bergoglio ascends to the throne of Peter. As I told you yesterday, Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauvin, who was prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization, for interreligious dialogue, he said, we chose Bergoglio because he has to advance the interests of the global left and implement the agenda. LGBT, environmentalist, green and woke. It was the defeat of Catholicism. We, within this, as theologians, have always placed a theological and spiritual interpretation. What is the theological and spiritual interpretation? That is the one of a false prophet, most likely Bergoglio, which isn't just, and here's the crucial point, he isn't just a representative of this global left that wants to apply the New World Order. And the 2030 agenda is an emissary of the saint. Got it? That's not the Catholic Church. I want to say something crucial that I hope you'll understand. My thoughts are clear, and please pray for me. What I'd like to say is this. There has been, up to this point, as the deceased denounced apparently so far Monsignor Carlo Maria Vigano. I remind you that he died in recent days, but we didn't feel the need to report it. Now, we're saying it because you don't know if he's dead. Monsignor Richard Williamson, still quite young, 75 years old, who reconsecrated Monsignor Vigano. What a shame. That was the stumbling block, in my opinion, that Monsignor Vigano fell into. But not just in my opinion, it really is so. Because if he had stopped at saying that Bergoglio isn't the Pope, that this is a church that no longer follows the gospel, and if he hadn't added to this Benedict XVI and even John Paul II, we would certainly be courting him now. Anyway, Archbishop Vigano has the merit of having spoken of the deep church. That is, what does deep mean? Deep means hidden, profound, deep church, which was allied, is allied. Still we can say is, but we hope to be able to say soon. Was is allied with the deep state. That is, of the deep state as well. That is, a global control of socio-cultural and political ideological orientations carried out by a hidden elite that doesn't emerge and that truly commands. Ready? Underground, are we ready? Okay, what's going to happen? That this system isn't the official system. But suddenly, Trump's victory in America unleashes a brave, perhaps even proud reaction from proponents of a completely different ideology who are, in this specific case, right now, from the East, the indefatigable Vladimir Putin, supported by an envied da un invidiato da parte nostra Kirill. The Patriarch of Moscow, envied. If only we in Rome had a pope who speaks like Kirill does. If only we in Rome had someone who speaks like Milei did yesterday. I'd asked my friends from the small Argentinian remnant to let me know what they thought about Milei, who's the president. And I got a reply. Meanwhile, it's been confirmed to me by the person who sent me this message confirms that the speech was given in Davos, Switzerland. And from minute 11 to minute 19, From minute 11 to minute 19, Milei unexpectedly, for everyone, heavily targets the woke agenda. Immediate, even more so than Bergoglio's. But be careful where I'm going with this. This is feminism, abortion, culture, woke, transgender, immigration. It's a dismantling, if you think about it, by Bergoglio, his fellow countrymen. And since unfortunately no cardinal has been able to do it openly, God allows Milei to do it. Who is Milei? They send me from those parts. I will not name who sent me. Naturally, this statement. I think, says this person, who is a culturally important person, very prepared, so I have a lot of respect for this person. Argentina of Buenos Aires. I think Milei is an instrument of God, but he's not a saint, on the contrary. Baptized Catholic by a Jewish father, he was baptized in the Catholic Church, but his Jewish dad found a fascination with the Jewish religion. He has many friends and is sponsored by powerful Jewish industrialists who see Argentina as a refuge from possible wars in the Middle East, and an opportunity to exploit Argentina's industrial agricultural production. However, this person adds, the surprise for all of us in Argentina is that he has shown himself to be anti-feminist, anti-woke, anti-abortion. Do you understand what this means? Look, we're living through history. This isn't simply the collapse of the Twin Towers, it's something more. Here, perhaps the golden idol with feet of clay is about to collapse. We can't know. Anyway, it won't collapse for the most defeatist, who I hope I don't have around me because I need to be, how do you say it, delusional. Because, well, it's not insignificant what we're going through. It's quite a shock. Because it's not the cardinal who says it to Bergoglio. It's a pro-Jewish president who's against abortion, anti-agenda, LGBT, and transgender. And that concludes it. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Spoken by a faithful member of the small remnant quoted by Argentina, of course, it convinces me that all in all, I'm making a point that isn't political, but rather, I hope, theological, and a theology of history. But I'd like to get to what I meant. The passage is this, my dear children, the passage is this. So, apparently, on a global level, there's a new axis forming. Probably prepared for it. We're not naive at all. The funding must have come from somewhere. What could have happened? What the Apocalypse says, that is, that the synagogue of Satan, the Antichrist parterre, at a certain point, collides within itself. There's a short circuit if you read. My book, The Symphony of the Lamb, we're commenting on it, but it takes time to get there. At those pages there, Babylon collapses on itself. The three frogs are boiled, let's say. The army is routed. Somewhere, something is happening. Trump in the United States of America, Putin in Russia, Milei in Argentina, and apparently, but I'm no expert, but it would seem, Meloni too. Now I hope that no one gets tired of these speeches and thinks that Father Minutella has suddenly abandoned spiritual and theological speeches to dedicate himself to politics. Whoever thinks this hasn't understood who Father Minutella is. This is a reading, a very important interpretation of the history that we are living at a theological and supernatural level. Here I would like to say what, gosh, I still can't say, which is the most important passage, and it is this. What could happen? It could happen that the deep state, at this point, is jolted. There's an earthquake. We're in the presence of an earthquake. Perhaps we can't say yet, but there's seismic shocks. No doubt. And that this deep state is finally fought by the New World Axis. At the opportune moment to empty it of meaning and defeat it. But don't think, my dears, that this can be applied to the deep church. Let me explain this move. I wouldn't want everything that's happening on a global level to encourage the cardinals in the style of Burke and Sarah D. Meller. And all those who think that what happens tell me if I'm explaining it well, because it's true and important that what happens in the world, sooner or later now, happens in the church. That is, the deep state is being fought by a new ecclesiastical axis, supported by Trump. We know of possible friendly relations. I don't know if they're Veganos friendships. With the Trump-era American notification through, for example, Mel Gibson and so on, those things there, no. And there, no. That's not possible. That's not possible. It's not possible because God, the church, won't let her be saved through human maneuvers. That is, what is happening on a planetary level is preparing a recovery for Rome, different from the criteria and dynamics of the world. I don't know if I managed to explain it. If not, sort it out yourselves. I'm clear on it. But the most beautiful thing of all, in my opinion, the point I'd like to make these days is that Bergoglio is impeded. Not legally, because there's no need, since he's not the Pope, so one is impeded in the see. If he's a bishop, let's say, legitimate, valid, of the see he occupies. But since he's not the Pope and he's not a sedevacantist, I'm not referring to an impediment. It's even a rather nice thing about Bergoglio, and the see is impeded. I mean, he's not him. And even Satan's partisans in the Vatican, who for years have been rowing in favor of the woke agenda, didn't expect this. Perhaps they feared it, force, when Trump won, in November, wasn't it, when he won? They realized things were looking bad for them. Perhaps they began to understand that the wind was blowing against them. You'll see they changed their style. Remember these words of mine. Living. Still, with Bergoglio they'll start to cut back. The issue on immigrants, the LGBT issue, they will try to filter things from the inside, even if the typical resentment of this false church remains, because it is diabolical. Last night at 9 or 7, with all these numbers, I'm getting confused. Either I watch Rai Tre, or I put on Channel 7, or I put on Channel 8. Who am I kidding? Playing bingo. So I don't remember if it was the 7 or the 9. Sister Paola joins a round table. Sister Paola is a nun, not the famous one from the past, who used to visit children. And that one was quite nice too, because she was light-hearted. This one, however, she's a theologian. She works with the poor, with immigrants, I believe, in Rome. You should have seen, since she comments, look how clever they are, the immigrants who enter handcuffed inside the cargo ships to be taken back. And she compares them to the Jewish deportations. You see, you understand. If these people are in the church, we can't move forward. The act by Trump and the American administration is a political one. It's a political act, a pre-announced act, and people voted for it to happen for reasons of internal security. That we do it. We Italians, it's not an inhumane act, and I prove it by saying that Benedict XVI and John Paul II declared that immigration is a right, preceded by the right to stay home. And it's to tell you that there is resistance. But Bergoglio's position is starting to be hampered. Do you think he can go back to speaking freely, as he has done so far with Trump and Putin? Nope. He has to be careful now, both for himself and for the person we're talking about. It's not a simple thing for me. It's not easy for him to digest this situation that's come home, especially complete. Javier Milei, who is the president of Argentina and one of the new spokespeople for the new, right? Let's proceed in order after I've told you these things. Meanwhile, Trump went to Davos. He also spoke and dictated the terms of the American administration, saying that there won't be, because then the whole problem, as they say in Sicilian, tutta zuffa e pecuaggia, it all comes down to the question of money. Money, money. How much money? Who was it? Mina, wasn't it? Who sang that? Money, money, money. How much money? Because Trump said that America will no longer fund research related to environmental protection. He's pulling out of the programs, the ones that were announced and carried out. This is a total defeat for the European Union. which is quintessentially environmentalist, which is green, because environmentalism and ecologism are nothing but variants. Pay close attention to woke ecology, which wants to replace traditional astrological values with new values to change everything without anyone noticing. And so Trump says, enough. We will no longer provide funding for ecology and the environment. Do you remember Bergoglio's Laudato Si? I don't know if you understand me. Do you understand what we're talking about? Do you remember the magisterium of the now broken Bergoglio? Praise be to you. And then there's another one that came out like environmentalist. I don't remember the name. Anyway, Laudato Si, you remember it. Bergoglio didn't seem like the Pope of Rome anymore. Seeing as, by the way, he's never been one, but he became the spokesperson for the woke vision of replacing ethos with ecos. So the so-called Pope Francis was worried about global warming, which doesn't exist. Apparently it doesn't exist. It's just a phenomenon of creation. Same, he worried about not killing cockroaches. What do I know about those things? The Green Pope, the Environmentalist Pope, the Ecologist Pope who receives the Charlemagne Prize from the Europeanist oligarchs who bring it to him in Rome. But no pope before Bergoglio had been so rewarded, so idolized as the so-called Pope Francis, husband of Lucia Walk. Gone now, the so-called shame of the Laudato Si has practically been ripped off his face. This encyclical is his own. But do you understand what we're going through? No, because as someone wrote to me, I want to read it to you, just to quote it, but I won't say who, of course, the names. As someone wrote to me, the problem is some of the small remainder risk being discovered, a fanaticism from which I, in every way, try to pull them away. Someone wrote to me, thank you. You have given voice to assessments on the fulfillment of the apocalypse through secondary causes, recognized with difficulty by few men, who, as usual, expect the Hollywood Messiah with trumpets, billions of powerful horsemen, and tendentially only to things done underneath. I perfectly endorse this reading here. Those who expect the apocalypse above their heads haven't understood anything about the significant meaning of the theological stamp of the apocalypse, which doesn't happen above our heads. We mustn't look at the sky. We must look at history, the White House. We must look at Milei's Argentina, of Jewish descent, who comes to Europe to say no feminism, no woke agenda, no LGBT agenda, no abortion agenda, and no environmentalist agenda. So we can now talk about an impeded seat of Bergoglio because he is no longer free to speak in the manner of Laudato Si. Yes, and fiducias, and this is the shame of Rome. Rome, shame on you. Rome. Shame on you. Rome, shame on you. You managed to write Laudato. Yes, and trusting supplicants with the most advanced environmentalist woke philosophy. And did you manage to produce the infamous Fiducia Supplicans document that protects the extremist claims of the LGBT gay world? So, is Trump coming as Putin is already there? That rips you. Rome, the American imperialist emperor, rips supplicating trust in your face. Let me tell you something. I'm quite seasoned. Expect Trump to go to St. Peter's in Rome to meet Bergoglio, though. But you must know that these things don't interest us, because they're matters relating to diplomatic dynamism, chancelleries, relations between states, which, these things really interest me. I don't know if Trump will go, I presume so. Sooner or later, he'll go. You'll see they'll work towards a handshake between Trump and Bergoglio. There's no doubt about that. Lots of photos, etc. But look, beyond that, it's the substance that counts, not the form. Bergoglio is surrounded. I really don't know how to thank Our Lady. Bergoglio, Rome, is surrounded. Now I know that while I'm talking like this, for some time now, who knows how the Vatican hawks are working? They know more than the devil himself to curry favor. The American administration, to see how to ride this, maintaining their own identity. This new world axis, maybe they'll pull the strings with Milei. You understand? Because these subjects, anyway, I don't know them. And I know that those who have power at the global level are morally unreliable in themselves. But at the same time, we can't know what someone like Trump thinks. Of Putin, yes. Personally, I think so. You? For me, Putin has a theological vision. But Trump is no different. Because Trump keeps saying he has a mandate from God. He said it on Inauguration Day. On Inauguration Day, he said that he has a mandate from God because he survived the assassination attempt. One might suspect, because us Italians, we're such conspiracy theorists, like no other people in the world, that attack was staged, it was all a setup. There are even those who suspected that. But if it wasn't like that, and I believe it wasn't, God's hand must have been there. Because the bullet reaches him at the very moment, just as he, almost imperceptibly, turns to greet the people who were behind him. And so the fatal bullet just grazes his ear, because otherwise it would have gone straight through, and that would have been the end of it. It was the deep state's last assault. It was the last assault of whom? I'm speaking as a theologian, and so I see all of this. Bergoglio's woke teachings are about to be torn to shreds. Woke Bergoglio, he deserves this end. What is this? We've said it so many times. He woke, it deserves to be said many times, he woke. Woke is a rich substitute, words, mine, of classic and traditional values, with other new values passed off as emerging and necessary. Among all of them, we could mention, for example, the environment. Do you remember Greta Thunberg, who seems to have disappeared from the scene? Do you remember Bergoglio's environmentalist pronouncements of the Laudato Si and so on? Well, this is what makes you think that now this seat of Bergoglio, which until a few weeks ago, a few months ago, was free to express itself, pleading trust comes out of the Vatican rooms. And it's Rome's shame because Trump, Milei, and Putin say no to the LGBT agenda, while Bergoglio was there promoting it. He who should have, if he had been there, promoted the family instead, according to God's heart, which is what the policies of Trump and Putin promote. So, for example, Putin throughout his life has been promoting God's family. I don't know if you know, I've listened to several contributions on social media, sometimes even on TV, but rarely, but rather on social media, of personalities, of thinkers like Alessandro Battista, I think Di Battista, who, for example, is someone who knows about Russia. He's sometimes appeared on television broadcasts as well. Or even Orsini, Alessandro Orsini. These are all called Alessandro. Alessandro Orsini. It emerges, for example, that Putin's domestic policy is an interesting one because he rewards families who bring children into the world. It seems that if they bring a third child into the world, there's a certain kind of state contribution, and for the fourth, rather than being decreased, it's increased. On the contrary, you see how interesting Putin's family policies are. He's loved in his homeland. Of course, there's dissent because there are about 200 million inhabitants. You can't think that everyone is with him. Even Trump in America was voted in by, I think, 60%. There's 40% of American Democrats who, well, nobody really knows. Now they're looking for a leader. But basically, Putin is loved by the people. The Russian people, although there is dissent and not much space to express it, to tell the truth. But inflation, concerns goods, that aren't mass consumption. Because they're smart choices. I mean, petrol costs, everyone can afford it. It's a mass consumer good. Where does Putin invest to keep the country's national economy afloat? Putin invests in non-mass consumer goods, but rather oligarchic ones, which the wealthiest classes can afford. It's a smart choice. I mean, inflation exists, but not on consumer goods, so as not to harm the masses, the people. And so the Russian people carry on and have children. Even Trump in America, who's divorced 3 times, tutela queste politiche familiari. Got it? Trump and Putin and in Rome. And no, nothing, in Rome, we bless gay couples, we perform gay marriages. Cardinal Zuppi, isn't it about time you started keeping quiet yourself? Now you see, because I know these people, what they're like. They're the ones who jump on the bandwagon. Slowly you will see that the rampant arguments of the woke agenda, the most advanced transgenderism, environmentalism, ecologism, eco-imperialism, gender imperialism will slowly be quelled. Pope Francis's seat seems to be impeded. And so, how do I conclude? Conclude, oh my dears, with a testimony that helps us understand. Because the subtitle then is "The Wind is Changing." There it is. We pray. I'll conclude as I began yesterday. I'll conclude as I began yesterday. This is the moment when we must now intensify prayer. In this regard, I'll conclude with a testimony interesting concerning a certain Father Peter who saved Austria from the Soviet advance that wanted to annex it. Austria incredibly remained free. Why was there this? Franciscan priest. Where are the Franciscans today? God alone knows. What the Franciscans do. The Franciscan world, the Franciscan charism, always manages to involve. It's no coincidence that Bergoglio called himself Francis. He immediately presented himself as a friend of the poor. It's no coincidence that the Franciscans are one of the most advanced phalanxes of the woke ideology of the false church. But back to us. Those who visit the Franziskanerkirche in Vienna, the Church of St. Francis of the Franciscans, will immediately notice the presence of a statue of Our Lady of Fatima located at a side altar. At its feet, a headstone proclaims it a symbol of Our Lady of Fatima, of the freedom of our homeland. What freedom's this? It was 1945, just after the Second World War, and Austria. Like Germany, Austria was split in 4 zones, each run by the winning nations. U.S., Freton, and U.S. The Soviet Union obtained the Niederreichsdreieck zone, the richest part of the country, which notably included the capital, Vienna. It was clear that in the climate created by the Cold War, the Soviets could never have considered abandoning the part that had been allotted to them in the post-war agreements, and thus maintaining their Soviet presence in this area of Austria, which also included the capital, Vienna. This part of Austria was therefore seriously at risk of becoming the Iron Curtain between West and East. It was in this dramatic situation that Providence raised up a Franciscan priest. On the 2nd of February, 1946, the feast of the presentation of Jesus at the temple, so who knows what might happen. On the 2nd of February in Milan, after celebrating Holy Mass in a convent of nuns in Graz, a Franciscan Capuchin priest named Petrus Pavlicek makes his way to the national shrine of Mariazell in order to pray intensely at the feet of Our Lady, asking for enlightenment to meet the spiritual needs of the Austrian people. While he prays, absorbed as if in ecstasy, he hears an interlocution. And what do you want? Could it be that the great initiatives arising through these locutions, think of Mother Teresa and Father Peter, and think of Don Minutella, could be motivated by these locutions. I never talk about it, as you know, but isn't that the crux of the matter? Because I too began my mission because of the locutions. Otherwise, I would never have exposed myself. He hears an inner voice that says, "Do everything I tell you, and you will have peace." It was the Madonna speaking to his heart. Then, if Father Serafino had been there, Tognetti would have said he was possessed. The Madonna spoke to him, "Do everything I tell you, and you will have peace." Later he'd learn these matched the words Our Lady of Fatima told the shepherds, "Pray the rosary, give Russia to God, find peace." And so, in February of 1947, therefore a year later, he founded a prayer movement with people who committed to reciting rosaries at different times to ensure that Our Lady was honored. Got the rosary? What power it has, 24 hours a day, throughout the whole country, without any financial support, seeing as the war had left the Franciscan order destitute. Father Pavlicek began to travel the country, the most important cities in Austria: Linz, Graz, Vienna, Villach, Feldkirch, Innsbruck, Klagenfurt, etc. He travels the country preaching popular missions. To recite the Holy Rosary, Rome, the power of Rome. Our Lady told Sister Lucia, "There is no personal, family, national, or international problem that can't be solved with the Holy Rosary." To avoid provoking Soviet repression, the participants in Father Pavlicek's crusade prayed for two intentions: the conversion of sinners and peace in the world. But in reality, the true motive that Father Pavlicek was pursuing was the liberation of Austria from the communist yoke. Father Pavlicek, who particularly insisted on the sacrament of confession, for which he had a special charism. After conquering the hearts of the provinces, the restorative crusade of the Holy Rosary landed in Vienna. In September 1948, Father Pavlicek, who initiated the acts of reparative devotion consisting of Mass, homily, confession, blessings for the sick, recitation of the Rosary, a small remainder, that is, Milan, Verona, Bologna, and Florence. Or am I mistaken? Or until 2 days ago in Udine, 3 hours of prayer, things that we did: Mass, homily, confession, blessing, recitation of the Rosary, things that we did. So it's not that perhaps this revolutionary movement should be credited to us, while the others were there doing who knows what. Called Sturmgebete, prayer assaults. These ceremonies could last up to 5 days. "Peace is a gift from God," said Father Pavlicek. "Peter," he would explain, "and it isn't the work of politicians. And God's gifts are obtained through prayer." Meanwhile, this crusade of Roma, which saw thousands of people participate, so he went 1,000, 2,000, a bit like us. It spread, however slowly it spread, and even reached Germany and Switzerland. The number of those enrolled in the crusade exceeded 500,000. We're only at 1,300. Congratulations to the Italians. And the miracle happened. I'd like to say something. If I'd been in the system, we'd be over 1 million. Now, if I'd pretended, like everyone else does, from Father Livio to Carlo Maria, who's Bergoglio, the Pope Hope, we would have all these numbers today. The numbers are lower because the system is against us. The system went against us, but bad weather doesn't always last. Surprisingly, on the 24th of March, 1955, so not immediately, the Kremlin leaders summoned the Austrian President Raab to Moscow for an exchange of views. Sensing that something important was about to happen, before leaving, President Raab, "Contact Father Pavlicek and tell him, please tell the faithful of the Rosary Crusade to pray more insistently." After just a couple of days of top-level discussions, the impossible happens. With no apparent motivation, the Soviets announced that within 3 months they would withdraw all their troops. On the 15th of May, 1955, the representatives of the 4 occupying powers signed the treaty in Vienna, which restored Austria's full independence. The event forcefully captured the world's attention. For the first time, the communists unilaterally withdrew from a country. The last Soviet soldier left Austrian soil on the 26th of October, 1955. The outcome was unique. To commemorate this triumph, a torchlight procession with the Madonna of Fatima was convened in Vienna, in which a section led by Father Peter Pavlicek, almost 1 million people with the highest civil and ecclesiastical authorities. The Austrian president made a speech in which, after acknowledging the merit of Father Peter and his movement, he concluded, with a heart full of faith, "We want to offer a joyful prayer to heaven today. We are free thanks to you. Thank you, Maria. This is the president, and who knows, maybe soon Father Minutella will be able to say these words somewhere on behalf of all of you. With hearts full of faith, let us offer a joyful prayer to heaven today. We are free, Maria. We are free from Bergoglio and the false church. We are free from this unprecedented imposture. We are free thanks to you, Maria. But we still have to advance with the crown in hand and move forward." Well, I remind you that tonight's unmissable episode, the 3rd episode on the prologue of John in the catechesis cycle entitled Tuesday, Giovanni's book, The Eagle and Sun, still available. You can reserve it if you don't have it, but we bring it around with us, of course, so you can get it. And tonight, an interesting episode, theologically dense. Don't miss it, and you can call now, about this or other matters. And I remind you to support the project, which is always in great need. It always goes through the description, the IBAN, the PayPal, and above all, I'd say a post office account, which is easier to access for elderly people who can't keep up with the dynamism of banks. When you go to bank branches, I remind you again that next Friday we are in Savigliano at 4 p.m., where the Casa Betania Center is. As you know, it's an important center. Small, I don't know how many of the faithful will arrive. Now we'll see how to manage it, because paradoxically, our problem is the opposite. We have a small center. It's a house, Bethany House. But let's see now how to organize things. We'll get there at 4. We'll recite the Rosary, a solemn High Mass of St. John Bosco, with the blessing of the saint's reliquary. I have with me a fragment of his skin. A close-up, can you see what's written? From the flesh, St. John Bosco, from the flesh. So from the skin, it's a piece of skin. It's a tiny piece, naturally, but precious because it's the skin of St. John Bosco. We'll bless with this. And with this, we will bless the faithful present in Savigliano at the feast of St. John Bosco, whose message, as we know, remains ever intense and fruitful.